Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations That Matter. If you're tuning in for the first time, I'm Yorona Boster, certified speaker and communications coach, life coach, speaker, author, podcaster. And the reality is I live, breathe, and function at the intersection of communication and healthy, balanced leadership. And I love helping people communicate with more purpose and integrity with both themselves and, of course, with all those around them. Before I introduce our guest today, I have a request for anyone listening or watching. As this series continues, I'd love your input for communication topics that interest you. And because communication runs really, really deep, a lot deeper than we think, I don't want you to be afraid to stretch the limits of where and how it shapes your life. Please feel free to DM your ideas to me, drop them in the comments today, or even email them to me at yorona@yoronaboster.com. And speaking of the comments, please feel free to share your comments live. I will happily jump on those and pull them into our conversation as my wonderful guest and I are speaking. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my incredible guest for today's show. Gloria Liebecker is the founder of Healing You Sanctuary and a trauma-informed coach, author, and facilitator of Constellations with Horses. She blends nonviolent communication, neuroscience, and somatic practice and helps people transform unconscious patterns into empowered relational living. Gloria is a co-author of the #1 best-selling book, Cracking the Rich Code. It's a book series, and Gloria and I have been in it together. And she hosts the Healing You Method podcast, a really great podcast. I highly, highly, highly recommend you jump on that because you will get so much insight and wisdom. You will just feel like you've been through, I want to say, a spa for your mind and soul after you listen to her podcast. So her work invites deep presence, an authentic voice, and of course, compassionate leadership. And it's rooted in the knowing that all healing is relational. Now, because of her expertise, I felt it really completely natural to dive into a conversation about that mind-body connection at its core. And in case you can't hear, my voice is not up to par today. So today we are definitely going to be talking about the mind-body connection because I am currently healing over a cold that I've had. And Gloria and I are going to dive into this mind-body connection. And I wanted to start that conversation with a really important question for you, Gloria. What I really want to ask, and what I think a lot of people want to know, is what becomes possible, truly possible for a person when they listen with their whole body instead of just their mind, when they truly listen with everything they have?
Well, they transform. I mean, that's the quick and real answer. That's where it's the alchemy, of life, because the mind tends to predict everything based on the past. And the mind can think it knows pretty much everything. And it's not really true because there are endless possibilities, like stars in the sky, of things that are possible. And so when we can really be fully embodied and really come into that place of wholeness and presence, we actually have access to that. And so I like to encourage people to really follow their heart, and you need to really be in your body to really follow your heart. So that's a place, if you look at all the stars, the mind will pick one star and it'll focus on that. Like, I have a cold, don't feel good. I'm gonna, and so that's going to direct your whole sense of self. Right. But there's all these other stars out there.
So, okay, so let's put that into real world experiential situation for a person. So like I said, this week I got sick. I started feeling not well on last Sunday. I noticed my throat was starting to feel sore. I was starting to get that discomfort in my ears and the ear and throat thing. And I'm like, oh no.
yeah.
And I said to myself, oh, I have so much work to do this week, and I've got so much happening and so much going on. And so I knew I wasn't listening to my body. My mind was like arguing with it felt like I was having an argument with my body. I could
Yeah.
tell that I was arguing. I was like, okay. And I was trying desperately to negotiate what was possible. And my mind was telling me, oh, but Yorona, your mind is perfectly fine. And a lot of the work I do is sitting in front of a computer, getting a lot of stuff done for my clients and for, and then there's a lot of work that I do when I'm in session with my clients, which is different, right? When I'm in session with my clients, I am definitely need to be there, present for them by mind, body, and soul and spirit, everything. But I said to myself, okay, but I'm still just sitting. So what is it really about the body? What is it about the mind that can convince the body that because you're sitting sedentarily and you're not like actively doing a job that requires like construction work or building something or running or, doing something super physical, what in the mind convinces the body that that doesn't need rest, that I'm resting well enough if I'm just sitting? Like, what is that?
Well, it's uniquely different to each individual because we each have our own human experience. And it's through those human experiences that we develop these patterns of thought and behavior, and even what we make things mean. So, we're just sitting. We make that mean that that's maybe the voice in our head that we're being lazy because we're not up and actually physically working. But that's not true because, the type of work when you are engaging relationally with your whole mind, body, soul, as you spoke, you're present. And for a construction worker, that'd wipe them out because that's not something they're used to. So we need to really recognize the context of what we're about. And really, when we're intentional and we're present, we can honor that. But when we get caught up in the patterns of our mind, we'll dismiss things, we'll deny things, we will just dissociate from certain things because we are on task for that one star. And it's not the wholeness of who we are. And so when we have a condition that's come up of like an illness or an injury or something, I like to slow down and empathize with that part of my body because, it's working hard for me. Yes. And why would I be so, I don't know, it's disrespectful to myself to not care the same way I would for anyone else. I like thinking about a small child. How would I treat a small child? Well, do I do that for me? I didn't used to.
That actually reminds me of something. When I was a kid, I remember this particular day that I was sick, and I told my mother I wasn't feeling well, and she insisted I go to school, and she dismissed her concern, that I said I was not feeling well, and I ended up going to school, and I had a fever. I went to the nurse's office. I had a really bad fever, so so it ended up she had to come all the way out and get me, and at the time I was in a private school, so it wasn't that close to home. So it was like, okay, and it makes you think about that because what you just said there about when a small child is sick, I see both sides of that puzzle. I see parents who are like, okay, are they just trying to get out of going to school or are they really sick? So when my son doesn't feel well, I try to look at it from like, what? If he's not feeling well, if something's going on with him, even if it's something going on mentally and emotionally, he's not feeling well. Yeah. Just because it's not something that's showing up like as a fever with symptomatic physical symptoms doesn't mean there's not something wrong. So how do I address that without, as some parents would perceive it, giving in or letting them be lazy or letting them off the hook for what they have to do and things like that. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that in the work that I've done with parents as well. And, as the mother of 5 children, I've gotten a lot of experience at that. And again, I'm going to come back to the heart of it. How am I being in a relationship with this being? Just because they're my child doesn't mean I dismiss what they have to say any more than I would you or any other, quote, adult. And so it's important to recognize, how are we being in relationship with this other being? Are we actually honoring their experience and helping them grow and develop that through the relationship?
Huh. Well, yeah. And it's interesting because I was thinking about this, but wouldn't you say it's true that like the nervous system is the first listener in the room?
Oh my goodness. It's listening before we're born. I mean, it's growing and developing. It's being shaped and molded into what and by what. And so when we're born, we're shaped and molded most likely by our parents' mind instead of their heart. Until they grow their heart, kind of like the Grinch, you got to grow that heart by paying attention to it, by listening to it, because it's soft, it's quiet. And the mind's loud. It is really loud.
It's really loud. Super loud, especially for some of us. Super loud. Yeah. That's interesting. So, it makes me think that sometimes we forget that bodies are already a part of the conversation.
Oh, they are, but we don't listen. It's talking all the time, and with the actions, the movements. There's one, people go like this. It's like, those are called the oh my God spots, right? And they're the neurovasculars. And so when someone's reaching there, that's the body communicating. I'm needing to get blood back up to my
when someone's going like
cortex.
this, when someone's kind of going like this.
All those movements are communication.
Yes. So it's very interesting because then, and if we take this back to kids, and we have a comment that I want to get to as well about this, and there's a child's component to this as well. But if we take this back to the kids' perspective, we as parents, when kids are really young, we're caring for their physical bodily needs. Once they start being able to communicate, it's almost like we separate the communication from their body's needs. And then we start to we're listening to what they're saying, but we're not actually paying attention to the other nonverbal cues that are going on, the physical nonverbal cues that are happening. Mm-hmm. And those cues are a huge part of the relational, as you put it, we are a relational species. So those cues are such a huge part of the relational aspect. If they're saying, when a kid says, when you say, how was your day at school? And the kid says, oh, it's fine. But you can sense that they're like kind of shrunk in on themselves. Mm-hmm. They're really quiet. They're looking off into the distance. They have like a tension on their face. Something else is happening there. And I guess the question that then I would have with that is, how can we listen with our body for the quality of presence we're bringing into a moment like that? Mm-hmm. Not just that we are, what does that do? How does that, if we're not listening with our whole body, can we miss that? What does that do to the quality of our presence?
Well, when we listen, in my experience, when I listen with my whole body, I'm actually more intuitive. I can actually receive information because, in our universe, everything's energy and information flow. But if I'm operating solely from my mind, I'm cutting out billions of information bits that can come through. Right. But when I listen with my heart, body, my mind, body, soul, as you say, I'm a receiver. I'm a really good receiver. I'm open. I'm not a closed circuit. And so I want to be an open circuit to where I can actually sense, I can intuit, and I can be empathetic. And I'm not going to force a conversation if a child is, shut down and needing a little time to themselves, but I'm going to allow my body to actually be a receiver where I feel safe to them. They can turn to me if they would like to, but they don't have to. And that's the relationship I want to develop, one of trust. Because part of their growing up is developing their own discernment of when to speak and when not to.
Yes. So pushing in that moment is not a good plan, but being open and receptive and kind of giving them the understanding that I am here and present if you want to talk. It's
Yeah.
more of that kind of openness, that
Well,
presence of
it,
mind.
well, in your facial expression, everything's going to be communicating.
Yeah.
But what are you communicating? Are you even aware of what you're communicating? I know when I first started learning more about the body and how it communicates, and the horses have taught me so much, I was shocked and
Yeah.
embarrassed at times. It's like, oh, then bring grace to myself, allow myself to be who I am. And, when I blunder, which I do, then I can always make repairs with whoever it is I've done that with myself too.
Yeah, it's really amazing how receptive we can be if we're also not blocking ourselves from preconceived conditioning and preconceived notions and preconceived or preconceptions that come from previous experiences. Because a lot of times I see where I see parents, where I see leaders, where I see people going wrong is they assume that what they experienced here is going to be the same experience here. So if they walk into a situation with, say, a colleague or a subordinate or parent to child, they're like, oh well, the last time I dealt with a situation like this, my kid just exploded and had this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem. So I've got to meet it head on. I've got to hit it on the I've got to jump on this before it becomes a bigger problem. And so we're operating from a place of, this was my experience last time, so I don't want it to be the same experience this time because that was a bad experience. So I'm gonna try to beat on it. I'm gonna try to just jump on it instead of going, every experience has the opportunity for a different outcome. Every experience. But when we're more open to the possibility of it, who knows where it can go and grow.
Well, and that's where curiosity and interest can lead us when we are willing to do that. We need to first be consciously aware that this is an opportunity rather than a problem. And so it's really one of the things that I've done with leaderships retreats has been, typically you'll have an obstacle course. So you're looking at already, it's an obstacle. Well, how about we turn that into an opportunity course? And you begin to move through. And what do you notice differently? So what is the perspective that you're even entering? The scenario that you were sharing was more like about, I'm going to jump on it. I'm going to control this. I'm going to make sure, and it's like, that's not relational. I don't like it when someone jumps on me and tries to control me and tell me what to do. Why would I do that to a child? Why would I teach them that that's okay? That's not okay with me. And I'm not willing to do that. And I don't want to live that if that's not what I want to have them develop.
Everybody wants their own self-agency, including children, including your subordinates. You're just because you're their leader doesn't mean you can control their actions.
Well, how do you lead? What kind of a leader are you? Are you truly a leader? Or are you a controller?
Right. And parents are leaders, but I think that they think they have to control for the sake of safety.
Well, then it again comes back to what was their lived experience. Do they have any models in their life that actually have had the courage to stand up and model something drastically different? Because there's a lot of cultural conditioning that we do experience.
Yeah, a lot of cultural, a lot of family, generational continuances of, this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way we will continue to do it. And to a certain degree, it's almost baked into your DNA at a certain point until you decide actively to do something different. So it's very interesting. We have a comment of somebody who's living in a refugee camp in Kenya and supports children with disabilities and their caregivers through psychosocial support. And I love that. So thank you so much for that comment. I am so curious about, what are your thoughts on, when it comes to a situation where you're supporting people who are in a situation where survival is the highest. It's the only the conditioning that they're currently dealing with. They haven't even gotten to a place of safety and security yet, because they're living in a refugee camp. There's probably a lot of difficulties there. And when we're talking about disabilities, that's a whole other level of communication that people have to be open to. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what kind of psychosocial support guidance can people do in a situation like that, where it's really high priority survival as opposed to thriving,
Well, you're going to thrive through the survival when you're kind, when you allow that to be the guiding compass. And there's powerful stories of people that have survived, and what allowed them to survive is they kept looking at all the stars in the sky. They didn't focus on the fact that they're a victim and that they're being persecuted. They looked at how they could help others, no matter even if I've got goosebumps thinking about it, but even if you are, quote, handicapped, you're still a soul, you're still a vibrant being. And there's so much we can do. I know many stories of people that have severe handicaps, and they've made such a beautiful impact in our world because of how they focus their attention with intention. And that's with presence, with a capital P.
With a capital P. I love that. That you reminded me of my niece and nephew. They were both profoundly disabled. They unfortunately each passed, but my niece made it to the age of 14 and my nephew to the age of 22. And something that I found as a recurring theme was when I would talk about them with other people, they got the sense of my niece and nephew's personalities very strongly. And I still remember very visibly that this a partner of mine who came and who met them once, and afterwards he said, wow, they were a lot more handicapped than I actually thought they were. They were a lot more disabled than I realized, because you don't talk about them that way. And I realized, and one of the reasons why I'm in what I do now is because of that, is because I realized communication goes so much deeper than the words we say. Just because they couldn't speak didn't mean they didn't communicate. They communicated a whole lot of stuff, and they had serious personalities. And so when I would talk about them, I would talk about their personalities through the lens of how they communicated nonverbally. And that changed the nature of the way I saw communication. And it changed the nature of the way I saw how souls become embodied and how they show up in the world. And what you said before, the presence and the impact they make, it doesn't always come from being physically capable or from being verbally, like magnificent. It actually comes from sometimes something that they represent, the personality that shines through in those nonverbal ways, and the relational way they show up. And I think that was something that was so beautiful to me. I mean, my niece, no joke, she had 2 words. I go. Those were her 2 words. She was always wanted to be on the go. Anywhere we could take her, especially the malls, always the malls. But she knew where the malls were within like a 50-mile radius of her home. And we'd be like on our way to a doctor's appointment, and she'd do, and I'm like, we're not going to the mall. No, because I knew she was. She's like, no, no, we're not going there. We're on our way to the doctor first. And my nephew was the biggest cuddle bug. He was such a snuggler and little coos and just the sweetest angel. And I think that what I worry about is for people who seemingly are normal functioning, neurotypical normal functioning, I think they do themselves a disservice of not realizing just how much more capable they actually are of communicating with everything they have. And I notice this a lot, with everything they have, than those who are actually, clinically disabled. Because they have a higher struggle threshold, they have to push through the communication thresholds even harder to make themselves known.
Well, and their lived experience is vastly different. They don't, I would even put out there that it's not like they know they're handicapped. This is their life. This is the way they function. This is the way they develop. And there's such a lack of education about the spectrum of life itself. Children don't come with a handbook when you have them, and depending on what your life was, that's going to be your limited education and your exposure. Yes. And so when we can take self-responsibility for how are we modeling this life, we can then give a different model for people to have a different experience. And then that's going to be a bigger ripple effect and a bigger impact.
I have a question about presence. Yeah. What do you think it is that makes it harder? What are the challenges for people in being present? The people who struggle with being present, what do you think their challenges are?
Vast. Well, it's true. I mean, it depends on the individual. But again, all that cultural conditioning that began in the womb, if not generationally. Mm-hmm. And, over time, those become very deeply entrenched patterns, kind of like the Oregon Trail, the ruts, and so deep that they're there. Yes. And it's been centuries, so it's like to recognize that and to honor that, but you don't have to stay in the rut. And it's, again, having models of what's truly possible. I had severe trauma. And what kept me stuck was shame, which is on the frequency of emotions. That's right before death. And so I always thought death was inevitable. And if anybody really saw me and knew who I was, then I'd die. Well, guess what? I'm not. And I've developed, and I've really developed more resiliency and courage and the ability to name the truth. But first, we need to be able to recognize what's true. And until we begin that path or recognize ourselves in someone else that can speak about it, we don't even know it exists. And so we're unconscious. We're not, quote, awake.
We're not fully awake. When we lack the ability to find our presence, we're half sleeping through our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really sad.
Well, and a lot of people don't know what they don't. Nobody doesn't know.
Right.
We don't know.
We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. There's so many things I look back on my own life's journey and I can recognize now. Yeah. And so, how am I going to apply what I've learned? Am I applying what I've learned? Or am I just going, oh, well, I'm just going to settle. I guess this is all there is. And no, I'm not. That's never been my way of being, and I'm grateful that I have the children I do because they've stretched me to grow. Because of my love for them, I have developed myself in such a way so that it's possible for them to recognize that there's more possibilities out there.
Yes. I want to switch this over to something because I just love some of the work you do because you work specifically with animals. And I'm not a horse expert, but one thing that I always remembered from the time I was a young child was my mother's affinity for horses. She had such a love of horses. She was reading me Black Beauty at a very early age. In fact, that was her favorite stuff. She was an avid horse rider. She did the equestrian team in college. She was all and when she was dying, we put together a bucket list of things that she might want to try to do. And one of the things was she really wanted to get back on a horse. Oh. And me at the time working in the world of developmental delays and disabilities, it finally struck my brain. Oh, equine therapy, duh. I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. I'm like, how are we going to get her on a horse? She can't even sit upright at this point. Mm-hmm. She was so weak. She was moving from the bed to the chair to the wheelchair. And so we got her back on a horse 4 times actually. And I have these lovely pictures of her and she's like, and all the specialists are around her and everything, but she kept trying to slump over. It was funny because they thought she was slumping over because she couldn't hold herself upright. And to a degree that was true, but she was also trying to hug the horse.
Of course.
And I had this wonderful picture of her like sitting in the saddle and like leaning all the way down and hugging the horse. And with the smile on her face.
Yeah.
Here was a woman at 70 years old dying of cancer. And the smile on her face was the most purest, angelic. Every time I see that picture, it brings me such great joy to have been able to bring that to her, back to her.
Yeah.
And I am curious, what it is about animals and horses in particular that helps people cross that barrier of reconnecting, of where they lost connection to themselves and reconnecting with themselves and finding their way back to presence in the relational world.
Yeah, well, we can go back to the energy and emotion, right?
Yeah.
That everything's energy and information flow. And so energetically, horses have huge hearts and they have huge guts. So they have really huge energetic fields. And when a human, there's heart math has done many studies that people can look up. But when a person is with a horse, they're in that field and our heart rhythm will actually sync up with the horses. And so it's like our nervous system syncs up with them. And it's such a beautiful experience. They did a study one time, which I really appreciated, is when they would have a person with a horse, and if they had them on a halter and they were controlling them, remember we're talking about parents and control, then it was a completely different experience that came through on the study than if they were at liberty. So the work that I do with horses, most of the time, depending on the container that's being created for the individual, is going to be at liberty, because it's really about developing a relationship of trust with this mammal. We're mammals, they're mammals. But in our mind, we think we're more powerful, we're better, we're smarter, no, it's not true. It is not true. Horses, in my experience, have the capacity to take us between worlds. They help us to time travel, to actually recapture our life and to recognize who we came here to be, to remember who we are.
Yeah. And so I'm curious about this, because I have met people who are scared of horses, and I'm so curious about that. And I wonder where that sometimes comes from. And I'm making an assumption that it tends to come from this creature is much bigger, stronger than me and can easily harm me, right? But it makes me think about what something in their life directionally told them about something bigger and stronger than you should automatically be afraid of something bigger and stronger than you.
Yeah. The horse could be representing a person or an experience in their life. So when I do constellations with horses, the horses represent all kinds of things in a person's life. It depends on what that person's life has been about. Because the horses, when they're in the field, that represents whatever the person field inside here is, they start to represent those different stars, where they can actually begin to see them and recognize what the pattern even is that they were not conscious to. So they help us to begin to access what's been unconscious and bring it into consciousness. And that's where presence abides, is there.
It's so interesting, because if we broaden this scope out a bit more into just animals in general, right, we can learn so much from animals. I was listening to something the other day, and there was two people arguing about whether human, like one person was upset that the other person was saying humans are animals, we're mammals, we're animals, we are animals. And the other person didn't like that. They wanted to separate from the animal. And I was like, yeah, but now what you're saying is like, what are you saying? We're better than animals in some way? And it distressed me and disturbed me, because I have a very strong affinity for animals. Always have. In fact, I was a veterinary technician in my 20s until I got into a car accident. But and it's a hard work. But I have always felt an affinity towards animals, and it makes me think about the communication aspect between humans and animals. And what is it? Is it, again, I go back to that, just because they can't speak doesn't mean they're not communicating something.
Yeah.
And that communication far outweighs that nonverbal aspect of what they're communicating, far outweighs the verbal aspect of what they can communicate if they were to verbalize. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't listen to the communication measures that animals take on in the world.
I agree. And I would take it out further, a further scope. We don't listen to nature. We don't listen to life itself.
Yeah.
You know, life is living and communicating all the time. And most humans have not developed an appreciation or a respect for that. They just think it's there for them to do whatever they want with, and they don't take self-responsibility for the care of it. And there's some studies out there too about plant life. There's communication.
Yeah.
If you would speak lovingly to your plant, you'll see it begin to thrive. If you speak mean to it, you'll see it start to shrink. And there are studies out there that show this, that there's communication. But have we developed the capacity to hear it? We have that capacity, but it's mostly unconscious and dormant.
It's untapped potential.
Yeah.
That tends to happen in a lot of people, which is usually adapted from, again, preconceptions of what is acceptable, right? If you see somebody speaking to a plant, you might think that somebody else might think you're crazy. And so it's like, wait, I mean, so it's funny. My mother had such a green thumb. I always tell myself I don't have a green thumb, but there was one plant that after she passed, my cousin gave me a clipping. My cousin took a lot of her plants and gave me one clipping. And I have managed, that clipping has now become 2, 3, 4 or 5 plants. Like it's huge.
Yeah.
It's all over. Hardiest plant, but I named all of them. And I do speak to them, and I'm like, okay, this I can handle, right? It's like, all right, this is good. I can handle that much. But it is interesting because what it tells me about me, and I think this is a broader scope for other people who are listening, is that I do myself the disservice of thinking I don't have a green thumb, and therefore saying it's not possible for me to help a plant flourish. Instead of saying, let me be open to listening to what the plant needs. Let me be open to listening to what, now let's broaden that out. Let me be open to listening to what the animal needs. Let me be open to listening to what my child needs. Let me be open to listening to, I'm a leader, and to what my subordinates need. When I think what I'm trying to get at is that this takes listening to a much deeper level than just what the sound that is coming into your ears represents.
Definitely. You're tapping into the frequencies. Everything's made up of frequencies. And what are the frequencies? And each of those frequencies actually has a communication in it. Can we hear it? Our nervousness actually can transmute into excitement. I mean, we look at the bandwidth of the spectrum of life, and we can actually alchemize it when we develop our ability to recognize it, to name it, and to step in and apply what we learn. But a lot of us, as you were saying, we stay in this, we have these glass ceilings, right? We have these places that limit us. And no, I just don't go there. That's not what I do. That's not who I am. And so we have these identities that's who we believe we are. And the belief systems actually are what keep us small or stuck or cycling in patterns that there's really not the wholeness of who we could be.
Because if we believe in it, and I always say, like, thoughts and ideas are one thing, but beliefs are the ruts. They're the ruts we've conditioned ourselves to keep walking into, to keep staying in that same lane, in that same path, in that same space, because we believe it so much that we can't see other roads of possibility.
Yeah, I like to make the key distinction between belief systems, because a lot of us have been taught to believe things.
Yes.
Well, to recognize that we've been taught that belief, but what's actually true? And the truth does set you free. But are you able to recognize what is true for you? Or are you so conditioned to believe who you are from outside of yourself? And so there's the distinction of really when I invite people to come into a space where they can embody their experience and recognize truth and discern it from the pattern of their beliefs. And it really radically changes lives. It's huge. And it comes back to that core of, are we able to create a container that allows what's been unconscious to become conscious? It's kind of like a flower coming up from a bulb and getting to bloom in all its glory. That's who we are when we are nurtured in that garden of life.
You know, I was thinking about this from a place of wonder. I think
I
wonder
love
is
wonder.
it's such a beautiful
Powerful.
thing. It's so powerful because it tends to interrupt that autopilot of habitual listening, habitual patterns that we take on. You know, it widens that that perception field so we can actually hear what's really being communicated instead of what we just simply assume is being communicated.
Yeah.
But wonder and curiosity and intrigue, I have never felt as much growth in my life as the last 4 years of my life since I've been an entrepreneur. And a big part of that is because I stepped into it with wonder at the possibilities and curiosity at what I could possibly learn, and intrigue and interest and just kind of openness to the learning. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past, just in separate conversations of like, we're both big avid learners. I always think like, if you're in light of learning, instead of trying to be right about something, instead of saying, this is what I know, this is something I see a lot of people, especially in this day and age. The more fearful we get, the more we stick with what we know. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's what's true. It's simply what we know.
Well,
I've noticed that a lot of people are stuck in a lot of fear-based patterns that keep them stuck in, well, this is what I know, so therefore it must be true.
And that's the survival pattern, though. You know, and there's what survival actually represent. It's a fear of death.
Yes.
I need to be able to stay alive. And so we flip our lid because the limbic system is now running the show, and we don't have access to our prefrontal cortex where our wonder resides. And so when we actually are able to slow down, I love the imagery of the limbic system being the baby. And when we can slow down and come in and hold that and be with it, we're holding the baby. Fear can come with me, but it's not going to direct my footsteps. I can be aware and I can be alert like the horses do. And I can recognize and look around me and see what's here and recognize what's true. Is it dangerous? No, I can go back to grazing. If it is dangerous, I can get out of there, or I can fight, whatever it is I need to do. But we need to be present in order to make our choice. And if we're not embodying our choices, we're being driven by our survival mechanisms, which means we're not really conscious.
You know, everybody needs to write this down, what Gloria just said. This is what I call a quotable. Fear can come with us, but it does not have to direct our footsteps. Everybody needs to hear that and be present with that, because that is one of the most powerful sentences ever. No, truly. Because that is the nature of life. Life is inherently risk. Why? Because as my mom used to say, life, nobody ever gets out of it alive. You know?
Oh my.
and the reality is, though, that when we accept that, we can accept that fear is going to be a part of that risk taking. But that's okay, because it also is the reminder that we're fully alive. We're fully here until we're no longer.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's all right. It's okay to be afraid. But the fear shouldn't be what stops you from taking those next steps.
Yeah, and I also would want to gently if I could, time travel to your mom and have a conversation and challenge that belief that was running her, that we don't get out of it alive. It's true. This vehicle that I'm in, yeah, it will have its time here, and yet my spirit will live on.
Mm.
And I recognize this as the truth from the passing of my own parents, the passing of my grandchildren, the passing of my beautiful herd members that I've had, kitty cats and dogs. I mean, so much of life. And the spirit lives on. This isn't all there is. And that's my truth. It's not my belief system. It's my experience. It's my lived experience that we can touch into that divine essence of life. And it stays with us.
Right? Because we've scientifically proven that energy doesn't go. And this vessel that we have is energized. It's literally energized by the essence of life. So once this vessel is no longer energized, it doesn't mean that that energy is just simply disappeared and dissipated. It simply means it goes elsewhere. And you and I have had conversations about death and things like that. We're both quite comfortable, I would say, for lack of a better word, with the reality that is death. But the death of the vessel doesn't necessarily mean the death of the existence of that energy. And I firmly believe that, because as you and I both know, we've both had experiences where it has taught us otherwise. And I have not yet met a single person who has experienced the death of a loved one and who doesn't believe that. And and maybe there are people out there that feel that way. I've not met billions of people in my life, so I'm sure there are people out there who don't feel that. But all the people I have met, coming from so many walks of life, who've experienced death, at the hands of so many places and spaces, all feel that essence, that energy that continues to live on in some way or another form. Everybody has felt it. So we've proven it to be true emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. We've proven it to be true to a degree scientifically. So until it's proven otherwise, and who's to say that somebody won't come out and prove it at some point? But all right, until it's proven otherwise, I choose to believe that.
Well, and again, what's proven, we're going back again to, you must convince my mind. And I don't need to convince anybody's mind of anything. I don't need to prove myself. I get to be myself. And that's living in presence rather than fear and domination.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I want to pull us back to listening with the whole body for a moment before we end here. I think it's really vastly important to, and I can't expand on, I cannot press on this enough, that when we truly do listen with the whole body, it reduces miscommunication as well. Because most miscommunication isn't actually about unclear words. It tends to be about unacknowledged signals, which is one of the reasons why, and my book, Unspoken Signals, it's a lot about those signals that are coming through underneath. And when we have whole body listening, it really does help us catch up to the emotional subtext earlier and faster. And it reduces that miscommunication that tends to happen, and then tends to keep us backing away into our own separate safety corners. Yeah. And so it gives us the allowance, when we're listening with our whole body, to respond to the real conversation that's happening and not the surface one.
Yeah, well, because we're able to actually be present, and we can stay open and curious and interested, and we can stay in the conversation rather than thinking about it and figuring out what we're going to say next. So that's where we leave. We leave when we go up there to figure it out, rather than just staying open and curious and engaged with what's happening now. So it's a completely different experience. And unless even having the experience of going, what I call going limbic. Like now I can't be present because all of a sudden I'm up in my head. Well, when I can be transparent about that, I go, oh my gosh, let me just take a moment because I realize I just got up in my head. Take a moment, come back into my body and breathe, feel my heartbeat, feel myself, acknowledge the sensations and whatever emotion might be going there, and even naming what the thoughts are to myself. Then I can come back. I was like, okay, I addressed, but I can take fear with me or whatever the emotion is. It doesn't have to drive my behavior when I can become aware of it. But until we become aware of what is driving our behavior, where our focus is, we're just at the mercy of it.
Yes. And this is something I want leaders to hone in on. Most leaders never want to be at the mercy of something else. They want to be in control. So what Gloria and I are really trying to expand upon here is that you can actually be a lot more attuned to, and you have a lot more capacity for leading in the healthiest way when you have that whole body listening, when you're really present, when you're really embodied in the circumstances, in the situation, and the present moment. And it gives you the ability to start trusting yourself with your communication responses. Gives you the ability to be a lot more transformative instead of transactional when you're leading people. And it gives you, and that comes from leadership, from parenting, and even in partnership. We can be so much more transformative when we are actually in trust of the relational communication that we build with one another when we're really whole body listening. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience that you want to share?
Yeah, what you were just sharing with people, that's where, in my experience, I've developed the confidence to be who I am. Because when I can stay present, I know me. And I can speak from my heart and my soul around my lived experience and the possibilities therein. And when I can be with someone else that way and stay engaged that way, I can do it again with another person. And all of a sudden we start to see the faces and the eyes of people instead of them representing something from our past. So our world expands, and we're here to expand. And so, yeah, don't forget about the stars. I want people to go out. They're there even when you can't see them in the daylight. They're still there.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I did have a very magical experience last summer with the stars. My husband, my mother-in-law, and my son and I, we went up to a place called Lake George, and we were staying in a place where we had these balconies, and we went out at night, and we like laid down on and just looked up at the stars all together, and it was magical. It was so magical. Our universe is vast and expansive, and I do believe, as you said, that our purpose here is to be as expansive as possible in the embodied space that we're living within. So, thank you so much for being here, Gloria.
Oh, it's just been a joy, Yorona. I love getting to have conversations with you.
Me too. Me too. All right, everybody. On that note, I am wishing you well, wishing you a glorious weekend ahead. And if you're looking to locate Gloria, just tell them quickly your website where they can find you and the work that you do.
Yeah, GloriaLiebecker.com. You can find me there, and I'm on social media as well. So look up my name and you'll find me.
Thank you so much for being here. Everybody have a wonderful weekend, and work on having conversations that matter in your life, just one conversation at a time.